And this is the Meet the Distributor session. So I'm delighted to welcome from Metrodome, Damian Spandley, from Curzon World Film, James King, who, if you were here yesterday, you'd have heard James's presentation, Colin Birch from Verve, and Tom Abel from Peccadillo. So welcome, guys. Thanks for coming along. I think one of the opening questions we've been asking on all of these panels is the sort of state of the nation type question in terms of where are we at the moment. So you lot are no different. So what's your view of? Because you had me out far too late last night.
Yeah, sorry about that. We're all independent distributors. I think that's an important point to make because I see distribution as a sort of as the haves and the have-nots. I think what's really dominating our area at the moment are the pay one deals, and I think that's what none of us here have a pay one deal. So just to explain, this is a very lucrative window in the film's life cycle, which comes after home entertainment, when the film may go to Sky or it may go to Amazon or Netflix. And the mini majors, so that's Lionsgate, Studio Canal, E1, and the studios, and it's including entertainment, who are independent but very big, long-standing UK distributor. They all have slot deals, and what that means is that before they put a film into the cinemas, they already have an idea of what kind of revenue it's going to earn for them in that pay one window. And that's incredibly important, as you can imagine, because it means that you can have a backstop on whatever you spend on theatrical. None of us here have that luxury, so we kind of have to sort of scrap it out and do what we can to sell our films in that window, because theatrical is very expensive and it's very tough to make your money back on theatrical. It's about theatrical still is the best way to profile your movie. It's still the best way to get it out there. It's still the best way to create value once the film comes off the cinemas. But it's very expensive and it's quite a risky business.
Can you mention a sort of minimum figure that you, as a distributor, would need to set aside for the launch of a typical British independent film? Just because often I think people don't understand, it's obviously, it can be difficult to get a distributor, but they often don't understand the challenges that you have in terms of the amount of money you have to risk losing before you even see a dime coming back. So
there's no set figure, because each film is different, and each film. I suppose what we do at the point of acquiring a film is we run a P&L, profit and loss sheet, where we say, okay, well, how much are we willing to spend on this film? What's the whole gamut: theatrical, TV sales, DVD sales, the whole thing. And you can release a film for a few £1,000s if you want to. We've done some documentaries recently where our P&A was £5,000, which basically just kind of covered technical and creating a poster and using the international trailer and so on. But of course, the sky's the limit, and I dread to think what the Star Wars P&A was, probably 10 million quid or something. So there's no. I think the thing I would say to a producer who's looking at distribution and how to engage is, just kind of like have a realistic idea of what the distributor should be spending on your film. There's no point distributor spending £500,000 on P&A if your film is a Hungarian miserabilist goat herding drama. Yeah. because you're not going to earn that money back, and you'll never and ultimately you're paying for it, because the way distribution is structured is that we pay in advance to acquire a film, in most cases, not always. Sometimes there can be more. There's partnership deals that we also execute. But we pay an MG, I think Jason mentioned, which is really in advance, but we call it the MG. And then we put money into the film, our release expenses, P&A costs, prints and advertising, And when the money starts coming back to us, whether it's through rental, through the tickets at the cinemas, whether it's DVD sales, whether it's TV sales, that money goes. That we recoup, but both our P&A and our MG before we start paying back money into to the producers and the sales agents. So you can be in a situation where you're saddling your film with unnecessary P&A costs, which effectively is pushing you back from earning more money over and above the MG. So that was a bit technical, but
No, it's good. It's good. Colin, what does the landscape look like from where you're sitting?
I think it's that interesting time, which often it is, that things are changing quite a lot. I mean, the DVD market is disappearing. The iTunes on demand is getting better, but it's not by any chance covering the DVD losses. The whole Netflix is interesting, but you've got to get in there, and they're obviously more interested in doing things like House of Cards and all the stuff they make themselves. So the things that sort of seemed quite hopeful have sort of gone a bit off the boil, and I think maybe it's a waiting game. But certainly for us, and TV is it's very hard to get TV sale, let alone get it up front so you know what you can spend. And we work the similar way, that we basically try and spend every single penny we think we could make to release the film in the cinema, so that the shop window is as big and bright as possible. But there's no guarantees that, you used to be able to say that you would sell a film to TV at some point if it had a certain amount of, cachet and it had a certain audience, but that's not there anymore, and you can't guarantee that you'll sell X number of DVDs. So we end up spending less than we would have done because we can't guarantee what we're getting in, and then I think that means sometimes that a film doesn't then perform as well as it's done because you haven't spent the money to release it. So it's quite a hard thing to try and balance not bankrupting yourself with giving yourself enough of a push to make some money further down the line.
Sure. And you mentioned you've all mentioned the fact that TV sales have declined or disappeared in many cases. Why are the broadcasters not acquiring those films now?
I think my personal view is it started certainly with someone like Channel 4, who was always a very big supporter of independent film, is that 15 years ago they discovered Big Brother, and they discovered that it's much cheaper to produce endless hours of idiotic TV than to buy a film from a distributor, which was relatively cheap compared to what they cost them to make drama. So that's been an ongoing thing, and then obviously things do keep changing, and they're now trying to compete with the Netflix. So they're obviously trying to buy the European or the American series to try and get. They're all about getting an audience as well, and as much as they might want to support us, they need to get people to watch, so the advertisers will spend the money and they can run their business. It's everyone's out. No one's trying to do us in. It's just their ways of running their business is changing.
Yep.
I think there's a sense as well that people are watching films on Netflix and Amazon more than they're watching it on TV. So
their audience.
So it's almost so by the time a network premiere comes along, the audience of that film has already accessed it elsewhere, whether it's in the cinema. I mean, there was a bulletin that I read the other day that said that that last weekend, World's End, the Simon Pegg movie, which did nearly 9 million UK box, was premiered at the same time as, I think it was Vera on the other channel, and is it The Night Manager on BBC One? And the audience figures were over 4 million, over 6 million, for the two dramas, and 1.1 or 2 for the film. And that's a film that did over 8 million quid at the UK box office. So the conclusion you can draw for that is that drama's working and films aren't working on TV, and that people have probably already seen the film because it veils to network premieres are they're often 2 years after theatrical release, and so they're veiling quite late. Yes.
Can you talk us through, Tom, the sort of criteria that you're applying when you're looking to decide whether or not you're going to acquire a film? I mean, what's the process at Piccadilly? How do you find those films and make that decision?
The first one is basically if we think we can get it to an audience, and that's being able to get it into exhibition, whether it's a film that the independent screens would support. and then how easy it's going to be to bring an audience in. I mean, as Damian and Colin have said, we don't have the cushion of TV anymore. We do a lot of foreign language films, and now the policy for the BBC, for example, is they only buy 15 foreign language films a year. That's all they'll buy. The policy with Channel 4.
How does that compare to, what number was that before?
Last year it was 20. This year it's 15, and I presume hopefully it will continue at 15. But in the past, you'd have whole seasons on BBC Two, but that doesn't happen anymore. And they got into having seasons on BBC Four, which are actually quite successful, and many of our films that have appeared in those slots have performed very well. But again, with both BBC and Channel 4, the acquisition of foreign language TV series is actually much cheaper. They can buy a whole series for what they would be paying for a couple of feature films, isn't it? So, and with the series, they also get really good ratings. So we're kind of up against that.
And what do you think is going to replace that revenue gap? I mean, is there another platform that can replace that?
Well, we still do make the occasional sale, which is handy. Our film Macaulay is coming on BBC Four in a couple of weeks' time, so please watch that. I mean, you've got places like Netflix. When Netflix started, we did some catalogue deals with them. We're due to have another catalogue deal come up with them, but it hasn't happened, and we've been waiting for it for over 6 months now. So that was it was a nice steady revenue stream, but that's now gone. I mean, we make the occasional sales from Netflix, but I mean, maybe they will do the catalogue deal, I don't know. But talking to distributors, international distributors, while we were in Berlin, I was talking to a lot of people from other countries, just about the landscape and what the troubles that they're facing, and everybody is kind of having the same problems that we are. And one of the American distributors told me that 80% of their revenue now came from Netflix.
Oh.
And personally, I think that's a really dangerous position to be in, because if Netflix stop buying from you, then you're kind of screwed.
Stuffed. Yeah. James, coming to you, and to pick up on that, we've spoken about it a couple of times over the last 2 days, but obviously, we're seeing Netflix write very big checks to filmmakers who've maybe been waiting years to make their films, and of course, the numbers are going up, and bidding wars, escalating the prices, and was kind of reassuring, I suppose, in some ways, to see Nate Parker opt for Fox Searchlight for very specific reasons, because he felt they could support the film as a, in the way that he needed it to be supported for distribution. I mean, where are we going to be in 5 years' time? I mean, what threat do those platforms pose to companies such as yours, and how do you counteract it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there was a couple of interesting releases last year. Obviously, Netflix acquired Beasts of No Nation, which they did a sort of very limited theatrical release of, but really was kind of all about, opening the film on their platform. And at the moment, I feel, there's been a lot of talk in the trades about how much money they're, writing these big checks, but that is obviously just the point at which they're trying to buy themselves into the marketplace, and they won't, they can't continue to overspend on new acquisitions. So it's as much a PR thing as anything else. They're all trying to bring new subscribers onto their platforms, and they're buying these sort of bigger films. Just as a kind of publicity stunt more than anything. I think in some ways some of their decisions have been quite encouraging, because some of those films that they've really gone out and bought have been quite tough films. Beasts of No Nation is not an easy film. It's about child warriors. It's not, the kind of obvious film to go for. And then Amazon bought Chirac, which was another very tough film, the Spike Lee film that was, an adaptation of an ancient Greek drama. So these are quite sort of interesting decisions as well. Obviously, and then there was, the Adam Sandler thing, which, is, I'm sure a film. But so you can see that there is some, and I'm sure more people watch the Adam Sandler thing than Beasts of No Nation, even on Netflix, because some people, everyone's allowed to, make their own decisions with how they spend their time.
But they're not going away, are they? So I guess you guys have to engage with them and find a way to make
The
it work.
best possible outcome is that all buying these films will draw an audience to Netflix for film. Because, for the last, since they started, everyone said what a crap choice of film they are. You just roll through pages and pages of rubbish. So if they can then get a film audience to their site for new, interesting films, then maybe they're going to want to start buying from us to keep that appetite going. Because, as James says, they can't keep doing it all themselves with the vastly inflated, amount they're going to pay for them. So, that's maybe being hopeful, but...
Yep.
Let's remain optimistic.
Let's remain optimistic, absolutely. One question that I think a lot of producers and filmmakers always have, it's a conundrum, especially for first-time filmmakers who maybe, have made their first film on a relatively low budget. They're not known yet. They haven't established a track record as feature filmmakers, although they may have shorts. And it's always that question of at what point do you approach the distributor? Should you wait to see if you can get picked up by one of the festivals that will give it the right kind of platform and hope that a distributor sees it there? Or do you get in touch beforehand? Do you show it to one person at a time? I mean, what's your advice to producers and filmmakers here about the best way to get a distributor to pick up their film?
It's a real sort of chicken and egg thing. I mean, we normally used to say that we wouldn't look at a film before it's been made unless it was, majority financed, or else you spend your time with loads of films you're waiting to come along that often never do. But, we have picked up films at script stage because they are an incredible script, it's an incredible idea, and it can take 3 or 4 years until you actually get the film. But, if you have a script or a project that you're proud of, and you think it has an audience, whatever that audience is, at least it has an audience, then approach a distributor. Sometimes you end up getting someone approach you with a film that's finished and they've done a show reel and they've done a PDF brochure, and it's clear they would have benefited from having a few conversations before they got to that point about what the marketplace is for the film they're trying to make. So in the perfect world, you can help them, not creatively, but certainly to make sure they are making the film that will have a chance in the marketplace, which unfortunately is what it's all about, or else no one's going to see it. But that said, it's not going to happen all the time, but it's certainly worth a try.
No, I mean, it's sort of interesting because you do have to, as a distributor, make a choice often. We tend not to buy that many films at script stage, and it's usually, when you're doing those pre-buys, it's because it's a known director. So you say what the next Michael Haneke film's going to look like just because of his previous films, and if you read the script, you're going to be like, okay, I get it. It's not a rom-com, but it's got an audience. Sure. And then some films, it's just too risky, and it can kind of pan out various ways. I mean, we bought a film that was called Still Alice last year, and we bought it at script stage, and there was no talent attached, and it was just an adaptation of a sort of internationally well-known book that actually really underperformed in the UK. The UK was the only territory where the book wasn't a real bestseller. But we bought the script for not very much money, and then Julianne Moore decided she wanted to win an Oscar, so she came on board for a film
that was that part of the deal?
Yeah. I think it was written into the script. She saw an opportunity, a role about someone dying of Alzheimer's, and figured Oscar, and then so she came on board, and I don't think she charged the producers her regular rate because I'm sure that would be more than the entire budget of the film. And then she really wanted to win an Oscar, so she brought her friends on board. So you have like Alec Baldwin and Kirsten Stewart and all these people, and all of a sudden the film becomes a much bigger proposition. And speaking frankly, if we'd waited until that film had been made, we wouldn't have been able to afford it because one of the kind of larger companies like Damo mentioned, like E1 or they would have picked this up because it was clearly much more commercial.
Sure.
but that can go the other way too. And there are many films we bought at this, script stage that haven't panned out that well because there's just so many like factors, like intangible factors, like it's set in a school and it all looks fine, and then the film is made and then you realise there was some scandal, and actually like the film is about someone who was abusing children, and it's not like you can't really put it out into the world. And so it can go, it's a risk.
Yeah.
It's a much bigger risk really to pre-buy a film.
The earlier you get on board.
But the benefits are sometimes much greater for it, but so are the losses.
Yeah. And Tom, what's your thoughts on that?
I was going to say one of the most important things for producers and directors, filmmakers in general, on that first step is to actually think about what your audience is. Because so often we have people come to us with projects and they haven't considered who is going to come to watch the film. I mean, if you're making it for your mum, that's good. But then just keep it for your mum. And we do get film centres which are very much like that. But yeah, the first thing is think of who your audience is, look at distributors, see what they distribute, and see if you think it's a fit, and you can approach them, and if you're lucky, somebody might get back to you, but it just depends on. Yeah, it might take a while. If it's a project for example, if it's a project I think we're going to be interested in, I'll tell the individual to keep on pestering, and eventually with some projects we get there.
So you will track projects if something comes in and it sparks interest, but it maybe doesn't have enough elements for you to make a decision yet. You'll track it as it goes along.
Yeah, we have several films that we're following that way.
Yeah.
But I mean, we very rarely buy at script stage, but with Departure, which is in the Glasgow Film Festival, we got that at script, which was I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago now.
Yep. And Damian,
we should probably mention the role of sales agents here as well, because I mean, if you're putting a project together and it's of a sufficient quality where you can engage with a sales company, then I would very much recommend it. And sales companies, I mean, we all acquire rights for UK and Ireland, but a sales company will help you sell your film around the world, and they'll also help you in terms of packaging it for distributors. And so if you can engage with one of those guys, they can help you with getting it into international festivals, building its international profile in order to make those sales in each territory. Then that's the ideal route.
That's the way you prefer to be approached through
Yeah,
rather than a producer coming to you directly?
Well, I think I'm right in saying that the majority of the films that we all distribute have been acquired through a sales company, because we have those relationships. The same way that your film might be a right fit for a distributor, the films from a particular sales agent might be a right fit for us, and you kind of know the kind of films that they're going to handle, and you have working relationships with them, and when we go to a market, we will prioritise. We have a list of the sales agents that we know will have quality product that we like, and a lot of the other sales agents we just won't see, because we go to markets with a team of 2 or 3. We can't meet everyone, and so it's a very good access point for you as a producer to distributors.
I don't want to say the complete opposite, but because we do primarily British product, we buy very, very few films from sales agents. Certainly, if a British film is being handled by a sales agent, it's probably directed by Stephen Frears or something, so it's not really our market. And certainly for a British film, if they can get a distributor on board, it then makes it more attractive to the sales agent, who know that they're going to be trying to sell a film that will have had a release in the UK, or else you're trying to sell a British film that no one in Britain wants, so it's sort of a harder sell. And also, I think if you're producing a film in the UK, it's good to work directly with a distributor, because then you can get that right, which is the territory you both know really well. And also the sales agents will try and charge you more. So it's better to have a relationship and get the film distributed correctly, rather than look at it as a possible way of making a bit more money, which might then not work in the long term.
Yeah, most British films will want a distributor on board as part of their financing. So what we would tend to do is, even if we do a deal directly with a producer, it's normally serviced by the sales company. But Colin is right. For a lot, we do a lot of British films directly to the producer as well.
What are the? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I
James.
was just saying, yeah, it's a fair point. Also, I think for filmmakers looking for distribution, one of the easiest tools you have is just what are the films that you would compare the film you're making to, what are similar films, and who released those films. So if if you've got a miserablist Hungarian goat herding drama, I'll probably be interested. But someone like E1 may not be so interested because it's not the kind of film that they're releasing. And it's it's also, you've got to factor in personal taste and the taste of the company and what people's passions are, because no one's getting rich off these roles. They're doing it because they care about film.
Yeah. What are the things that producers, filmmakers do that really bug you as distributors? What, if you could give people in this room some advice on what not to do, what would it be?
Cast Adam Sandler.
Sorry, cast Adam Sandler.
I guess my biggest bugbear is when you're releasing a film, is that they need to let you do your job, and we don't tell them how to make their film. But it does come a point when so many people think they know everything that we do. Which none of it is rocket science, but it's sort of based on knowing what works and what we can and can't achieve, and spending 4 weeks arguing about the font on a poster can be sort of quite wearing, and it can end up preventing you from doing the proper job that you need to do to make the film work. Yep. But that's just me.
And I think my advice would be that I think expectations are always a big problem for us with filmmakers, and in that they've shown their film to a group of people who love it and give them great feedback, and that for them automatically becomes something else, that there's a broader audience out there for the film. So I think the advice I would say is that you've got to sort of take a step back and actually think quite coldly about your movie and listen to the distributor about who the audience are and how big a film can be, because it's not unusual for us to have approach a film that we think is a 10-print release, and the distributor and the producer thinks it's 200-print release, and that happens.
I think also that it helps if the producer and director are willing to listen to the marketplace. It's what we have to do. And we always say that any film has 3 different audiences, which you've got to get past the exhibitors. They've got to like it and they've got to want to play it. You've got to get past the press. They've got to like it and give it good reviews and give you coverage. And only then can you actually get to the people that you want to see it and we want to pay money for it. So it's not like once we've done our job, it's a shoe-in. It's still, we have to react to the market in terms of what we can achieve and what they want from us. And unfortunately, it's often that what they want is not what we're trying to sell them, because they're wrong. But that's,
You're all being very polite. You must have come on. We want to know about the punch-ups and things. Like do things ever fall apart where you get on board a film and the producer's expectations are just way out of whack with what you can do for the film? And if so, how do you manage those situations? You just get rid of them, or what do you do?
Well, we're usually quite upfront with what we think a film can do, and sometimes it's very disappointing for the producer, and sometimes they have to go away and think about it. Or I'll pull together sales figures of films that they think were really successful, and then show them what they actually did do, and try and put them into perspective that way. But one of my biggest things, the thing I always say to producers, is that when you're making the film, have a photographer, because there's too often the independent films, they don't have photographs, and grabs from your movie are just not good enough for publicity purposes. And really, any music you do, use, clear it. Don't just think it's going to get cleared down the line, because we just have that too often. And if it's a track you want to use in the trailer, clear it for the trailer at the same time, because otherwise it's going to cost a fortune. Those are my 2 big binds that we have with a lot of indies.
We had a very interesting thing with the photography, which unfortunately it's always the thing that gets cut because the budgets are being scythed and don't need a photographer. And we had a romantic comedy delivered to us with a few nice stills, none of which contained the 2 leads together. It's that was quite hard.
Yeah, I have an equally silly story. We did a Merchant Ivory film called Mercy Dr. Ray, starring Jane Birkin, and Ishmael always used to do things really on the cheap. They didn't have a photographer, and Jane sort of puts her hand up and says, my friend's got a camera. And so they employed Jane's friend to take the pictures, and 90% of them were out of focus. It was there was a lot of them, but they really were poor.
That's really quite shocking. I mean, that I can't believe that people are. But I mean, you have a contract with the producer which states the deliverables. So if they deliver the film to you without any photographs, I mean, they're in breach of contract.
There were a lot of photographs.
Yeah, but none of them worked.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's obviously something that is quite hard to define, and particularly if the on-set photographer, fancies themselves as being a real artist, and you get 50 shots of like a plastic bag attached to some wire flapping in the wind, which happens. There is one very well-known photographer who works on a lot of big British films. And the supply, every time you hear their name, it's like your heart sinks because you know that you're not going to get anything that's relevant. And it's really tough. Obviously, the stills need to reflect the spirit of the film.
Sure.
They need to really sell the film. And yeah, if you don't have the key cast, which does happen, does
you're
happen
already
a lot,
at a
or if
disadvantage.
it's everyone having lunch, and it's like behind the set stuff, which is great, but not for the purposes of publicity.
Yeah. Talking about publicity, I mean, how important is it for the producers themselves to come to you with a sort of publicity strategy and to do all that kind of work in advance? I mean, is it because they're going to sit down with you and then you're obviously going to strategize on behalf of the film in the way you're going to release it? I mean, does it help you, or is it a hindrance?
It depends. I think on sort of certain documentaries, they really massively benefit from proper grassroots activity, and that's where sometimes it can make the most impact, particularly if it's a documentary about something very specific, like yoga. I didn't release it, but when I was at the ICA, we had a film. It was actually, I think, a direct deal. I don't think it had a traditional distributor, but it was the first yoga documentary that had really been made. And it just sold out for weeks because the film wasn't very good, but no one had a yoga documentary, and there's loads of people who do yoga, and they were really good at reaching out to the yoga community, and it was a massive success, and that was without any advertising spend, without any reviews. I don't even think it was just like all grassroots activity, which really, really helped. So on certain films, I think particularly on documentaries, the grassroots campaigns can be very effective.
We had a presentation yesterday from a group of people who are working as impact producers or outreach producers. Sometimes they're known as PMDs, producers of marketing and distribution. I wonder how you feel about that term. But obviously, building an audience in advance through social media, through Twitter, through Facebook. How much notice do you take of that when a producer brings a project to you? I mean, obviously a very specific one like that, but in general, are you seeing, is that the norm now? Do people come to you and say, I've got 25 million followers on our Twitter feed, therefore we're going to be a success? And does that make any difference to you?
Well, generally, producers and directors have spent so much time there making their film, they don't have time to do anything other than the normal organic sort of social media. And I still don't know entirely if having 25 million followers is going to do any difference at all. We've had films that have had fantastic social media, whatever they call it, connection, and gone mad, but it still doesn't always relate to people buying a ticket to go and see the film. People can be interested in the film, they can want to talk about it, but you still got to get them to convince them to spend. And like they're saying, in London, the tickets could be between 15 and 22 quid. Still a lot of money, and it doesn't mean that because they're interested in the film, they need to have a bit more backup to make them choose your film as the one of many to go and see. So I think it's good, and you have to have it, but I'm not entirely convinced that it is the thing that actually drives people into the cinema.
That there's a correlation. And you quite often hear people, particularly directors or writers, will talk about, when they're thinking about cast, look at someone who has an amazing Twitter following, and hope that says something about their appeal to an audience. I mean, is there any correlation when it comes to cast? Does that influence
I
your
still think
confidence in the
we're
casting?
too early. It's like, when it's still in its infancy in terms of a way of gauging how you can get an audience. I mean,
Yep.
it might be, but then, it's that thing. The fact that the cast member has the following is great, but it just depends if they're being put in a film that their following actually want to see.
Yep.
They could be a young actor with a great following of teen girls, but then if putting them in a
If you put them
East
in the
End
gold
gangster
film.
they might still read about it, but they're not going to go and see it. It's still down to a real complete match between the star, the film, and the people that want to see it, and they might not be the same thing.
No one's buying Kanye West's clothes, as we all know.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. What about festivals? How much does a festival appearance impact the chances of being acquired? And which are the festivals that really, I mean, obviously being polite, but which are the festivals that really matter? So if for producers and program makers, what ones do you take account of in terms of the market and selling your films?
In terms of showing them after we've acquired them.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, to Jason's chagrin, I mean, London is still the one that you want to get your film into because it's a festival that just has that cachet. But then again, something like Glasgow, Edinburgh, festivals that you can get an audience aware of your film and where the film is then going to play when it opens. I mean, we've got a film in the festival tonight which has just got 4-star reviews in 3 Scottish newspapers. So that's really good, and it really helps because it helps the awareness of smaller films. We don't go and spend £18 million on TV advertising the week before it's released like the studios. So we need people to be aware of the film over a sort of a longer period, so they can sort of then remember it when they see something else and then talk about it. So from that point of view, festivals are great in that it gets a film to our audience without too much of a hard sell. It's not us saying this film is fantastic. It's them going to a festival that they've mostly been to before and they trust, and they will see a film and hopefully like it, and that will then sort of spur them on to talk about it. So it's sort of advanced awareness is really good for us.
I think it's also about the size of the festival. So obviously, if you're putting your film into Cannes, it's probably going to get lost unless it's an absolute masterpiece, because there's just so many films there. So it's about choosing, it's sort of a balancing act between choosing, a festival that is big enough that it means something, that you will get those reviews, but also maybe that it's small enough that your film can really stand out within that festival. Because all too often, a great film can get lost in a big festival.
But presumably you would prefer to acquire a film before its festival so that you can have an impact on those decisions. I mean, do you have scenarios where you've seen really great films kind of misfire because that happened after the fact, and maybe the film played at the wrong festival and it didn't get the kind of launch therefore that it might otherwise have had?
I think there's a definite scenario where people get very excited because a festival likes their film and they put it in either way too early before the release is likely to happen, or it's the wrong festival that will then preclude you going for the right festival. So it's definitely better to have, as I would say, a distributor on board before you decide which film to put your festival to put your film in, or else you can actually just throw away what could be a great opportunity to do something relatively cheaply, and again to show your film in a situation where people can respond to it rather than being forced to it by.
And when you plan a release for a film, Damian, maybe you could speak to this. I mean, what are the considerations that you're taking into account? So you've just acquired someone's film in the room. What are the different elements of your plan that you need to put in place?
We often will have a distribution strategy. Sometimes it's actually a document. Sometimes it's part of our pitch in to the producer or the sales agent to acquire the film. And we'll have first thing we'll do as a team is we'll have a positioning meeting, and in that meeting, we'll talk about the film. Everybody will express their opinions about the size of release. We'll come up with a list of titles that you know, a similar audience, or maybe from the same filmmaker or similar cast or themes. And that's a very important list, because from that list comes a great deal of your strategy. You'll be able to look. I mean, we actually do comp analysis on those films as well, so we can actually usually get hold of information about how that distributor on that earlier film has released the film, where they've spent their money, which newspapers that they did, how much media spend they had. And then we just, in that meeting, we just start to formulate a sort of a full strategy. You know, PR, what are the best publications to cover? You know, which reviewers do we want to get in early to see the film? You know, which festivals are the most appropriate to launch? We sort of take it from there. And you know, obviously each department, marketing, press, cinema sales, are all present. And then we sort of go off and each formulate a plan and start putting it into activity. And you know, we'll have an early press show, a long lead press show, so that the long lead magazines can see it 3 or 4 months ahead of release. We'll screen it to the cinema programmers, start formulating their feedback, and everything kind of goes into this sort of central pot where you know, where we effectively put together the nuts and bolts of the release. And
what period of time do you need to do that effectively, and you know, for the best outcome for the film? Well, I think it. I mean, you can turn around a release pretty quickly. I mean, one of the things we did a Polish film a couple of years ago, and to my sort of shock and horror, it was the best screen average of my career as a distributor. And I hadn't even heard of the film 4 weeks before release. And so the opportunity for that film was to get it into cinemas in front of a Polish audience at the same time the film was being released in Poland, because that Polish audience are accessing Polish TV every single day in their homes. So we were basically getting tens of £1,000s worth of free advertising, because they were big films in Poland, and that's how it happened. I remember, I mean, Fahrenheit 9/11 was a famous one where they had to get it out for the election, so that's Optimum, now Studio Canal, acquired the film. 6-7 weeks, I think they did the deal before. You know, it was very, very quick turnaround, but they had to get it into the cinemas on that particular day. Everyone was holding their programs to make sure to wait for the deal to be done. But I think for most films, you're looking for, you know, probably 6 months really, maybe longer, because I mean, in terms of if a film is of a certain size, you're going to want to sort of premiere it in one of the big festivals. And you have, you know, Edinburgh in the summer, you have London in October, and then obviously there's Dublin and Glasgow in February, and that's usually that forms part of your thinking as well. But certainly, you know, at least 4 months, I would say, in advance, because you've got to start screening it to press, and if you miss that long lead opportunity, then you're not doing a good job on the film. So it's useful for people to be aware of that, so their expectations are realistic when they come to you, and they're not chomping at the bit for it to go out. Yeah,
we're often held back as well against other territories. So you know, so we have a film called The Daughter, which is an Australian drama with Geoffrey Rush and Sam Neill in, and that's being released in Australia in March. And we're held back. We have dates where we have to wait for them, and then we have to wait for our home entertainment date. It has to be 4 months after them, and often if a film is unsold for the US, the sales agent may put a US holdback in there because the US distributors like to go first, and so often there are restrictions put upon us by the deals as well.
Colin, Couple in a Hole is premiering tonight.
It is.
Is that the film that got the 4-star reviews?
It is.
Oh, excellent. That's great. Am I right in saying that you signed on to distribute that in 2012, or certainly some time ago anyway, before it was shot? What drew you to that project at the early stage?
It was just the most odd script. I mean, completely balmy, but it was really well written. It was really inventive, and like most of the films I like to distribute, it had an unhappy ending. So for me, it was, you know, again, it was a question of they had to then put that on screen, which is always a risk. Although to be fair, we've been involved in a number of films where we bought them at script stage, And the only one that's been an absolute disaster is the film that was directed by a well-known, very experienced director. So, you know, you can get lucky. But yeah, so it was, it had, you know, 2 great lead roles that you knew were going to attract really good talent to play the parts. It was just something we wanted to do, which I think, and it's that thing, I think certainly is, as a distributor, and I think what most people do, you react to a film in a way that you just feel that's something you want to do. I mean, obviously, if you see a film that you know is going to take 20 million quid, you'd react to it as well. But in terms of the sort of films that we do, which is relatively small, they have to have something in them. They have to have a core in there that's going to resonate with people, or else they might as well go and see something else, because they're not going to come and see them because we spent a lot of money on the advertising, or that there's a huge star in them. So, and they are often quite a slog in terms of releasing them. So if you don't actually believe in the film, then it can be quite soul destroying. So we choose to make no money and have films we like.
Yep.
So yeah, so that, I mean, so it was a punt for us, because it could have gone horribly wrong, but fortunately it didn't.
And it's very much a gut instinct that you're responding to when you find something like that you think is really
it's not science.
special.
It's not based on any real, you know, business acumen. It's basically, it's what we do, but we need to have something that we really like to do our job well and to make the best of what we're trying to, you know, release.
Yeah. One thing that I think we're always managing as producers when you're working with writers and directors is when is the right moment to get that script out, and that can be quite a tricky balance. Sometimes, you know, there will be an urgency on behalf of the director who wants to get on, make their movie, get that script out and get it sent. I mean, I think obviously you have to be very careful with that, because I don't know how many scripts a week you read, or how many submissions are on your desk, but it's fair to say, I guess, that you've got so many to read that if you get beyond 10 pages and it's not grabbing you, will you read it to the end, or will you just say, well, it's not going to work?
You have to reach the end just in case it suddenly turns into something that you didn't expect. I mean, obviously, from our point of view, if you're sending us a script, you have to send it out to us knowing you are perfectly proud of that script. You can't. If you send it out thinking, well, I'm nearly done, but let's see what they think. I had a boss once had this fantastic phrase, which applies to lots of things, that you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And if you read a dodgy script, even if they send it back to you, you know, 6 months later saying it's, you know, a Pulitzer Prize winner script, the chances of you reading it with any sort of gusto are very, very small. So you've got to make sure the thing you send to the distributor is something that you can, you know, say that's the script I want them to read.
And also the time at which they send you the script. I mean, do you prefer to read a script when it has cast attached and it has other elements in place like that, or are you agnostic about that?
I think it depends on the story, and I mean, I think it kind of depends on the proposition as well. And that's why bizarre things like titles play such a factor. I sort of have a weird theory about titles actually having more of an impact than we really give them credit for. You know, even just a striking title like, well, Couple in a Hole, you're going to read that script, aren't you? Because it's a good title. And you're like, what are they doing in that hole? And suddenly, like, you haven't even opened page 1 and you're asking yourself questions about the premise, and like, already an idea is kind of flowering in your mind. And even The Lobster's like a really good title, because you're like, what? And then even if you don't like the film, you're telling someone about it and they're like, what's it called? And it's like The Lobster, and someone's interested, and it goes on. I think sort of an interesting case example, just on the subject of titles, is we released a Swedish film called Force Majeure, which did very, very well in the UK. It's kind of well within the sort of comfortable art house world of cinema. In France, which is traditionally, you know, puts us to shame in terms of film culture, the film really underperformed because they called it Snow Therapy. And it's a great film, but if your title is Snow Therapy, it's just rubbish. It's really crap. Like, and no one wants to go and see a film called Snow Therapy. So like titles are
really
almost as important as the
Wow.
script themselves. If you've got a striking title, then you don't, people aren't thinking who the cast are.
And how often are you having a debate or a discussion or even an argument with the teams that you're working with when they're set on their title and they think it's the right one, and you know that it's going to be a snow therapy scenario?
I remember when I joined Metrodome, because Metrodome was for many years principally a sort of home entertainment company. They started off as a theatrical company, became a sort of more home entertainment. I think there was a moment where sort of 80% of the company's turnover was in the home entertainment market, and now we've sort of over the last sort of three years have sort of rebuilt ourselves. But there are two elements to the company. We have a theatrical sort of world cinema side to the company, and then we do a lot of the sort of DVD sort of straight to video genre movies. And I remember in my first meeting that one of the agenda points was title changes. And it was there the following week, and I said to someone, what is this? And they said, oh, well, we change titles all the time. I mean, I think we probably do change titles sort of maybe, I don't know, like maybe sort of 5 to 10% of our titles a year are title changes. And I mean, this is more really mainly for DVD, which is, really, the market, the DVD market is dominated by the grocers now, and it's really about impulse purchasing. So it's a very different sort of marketing mechanic than cinema, which is more about letting people know about the film and building up interest through reviews and press and so on. Whereas a DVD, particularly if it's I don't know, sort of like a London set gangster film, of which we release quite a lot to sort of keep the lights on at Metrodome Towers. It's really about Gary. My boss calls him Gary, and Gary is is a sort of working class guy who just stares at the DVD counter while his missus is loading the trolley, and it's just about impulse purchase, and so the title is absolutely essential, and we change so many of them. I mean, a good example would be Christmas movies. We buy kids movies, and then we'll just give them an imaginative Christmas title. So we had one called Nico 2, so we called it The Magic Reindeer, which meant that we could sell it to TV, and it could go into that Christmas window. Santa, there was one about a little dog at Christmas. We called it Santa's Little Yelpers. One of our best-selling Christmas titles, just because of the title.
Yep. Are there title people in your companies? People just do titles, or
we have a competition. People can just and then so you get if you're a runner at Metrodome, you might get a chance to title a film if you've come up with the right one.
It's obviously the runner at the French company that renamed Force Majeure.
yeah.
Snow therapy. That's great.
And Tom, as a specialist distributor, I mean, what are the changes in the market that you've seen for the sorts of films that Piccadilly would release in the last few years? Titles notwithstanding.
Yeah, we don't have to change titles too often, fortunately. I think as we've been discussing earlier, the whole market is going through great change at the moment. We have the decline of DVD, but it hasn't been too dramatic for us yet, but I can see it continuing to go down. Our online sales are increasing. Again, as like Colin said, it's not the amount that we're selling more on iTunes doesn't compensate for what we're losing on DVD. Theatrically, it's very tough. It's very hard to get the runs that we want. With certain key titles, we will. I mean, we're releasing Embrace of the Serpent later this year, which everybody seems to want to book, so it's nice to have a film that everybody wants. So that's relatively easy, but it's the other ones that you really have to work on. Next month we release an Israeli film called Next to Her, which is a very powerful drama, but getting it into the cinemas is really, really difficult. And in many cases we've tied in, bring the director and the 2 stars over to have event screenings at the cinemas where it's going to play, so that helps secure them. But I don't know. I think this year is going to be a big year of change for everybody. So, and we'll see who's still standing at the other end of it. I think
which I'm sure James talked about yesterday, the PVOD model, where you release films theatrically and on demand, just to rent at a premium price, which we've sort of, having fought against it, have started doing. And you know, the returns you're getting on for your online sales and the price you're getting is significant compared to doing it when you release it on DVD. So that's a sort of an interesting thing that obviously is going to get more and more prevalent, and hopefully it will be embraced by everyone and it won't be such a problem. And also we've released a couple of films over the last year where we've met with the producers and directors and said, you know, this is not a film that's really a theatrical film in terms of a big release, but we've done it where we've had, say, 8 screenings, each of which had a Q&A. They brought an amount of information about their audience and maybe their close personal friends. But so they've had a theatrical which hasn't been too expensive. They've had 8 sell-out screenings which they can go and stand in the front of and talk to them and feel very, very happy about. And then we just do the online demand DVD afterwards. And that, I mean, again, it's not what you traditionally think of as a full theatrical release, but you get the reviews and the awareness to feed the rest of the machine as you go through the various other exploitation areas. And the director, like the one film we did, we had a premiere, in inverted commas, which basically was everyone that had financed the film or friends of them, at a cinema in the West End. They were made out, it was exactly what they wanted, and it wasn't that expensive. And so they got what they wanted out of it. The film got released, and then we got the film into supermarkets. So everyone was happy without it being the sort of thing we wouldn't even have thought of, 3 years ago, because it just wasn't the way to release a film. You know, as old as you are, you've got to change and react to the market, and that's what I think we're, certainly small distributors are going to have to do more and more just to be able to afford to do it.
To survive, yep. I could talk all day, actually. I've got lots and lots of questions, but I think we should probably open it up to the floor. Are there any questions in the... Yep. You get someone to mic?
Hi guys, thanks very much for coming up to Glasgow. We've learned a lot here. We've learned advice, info that money cannot buy, so thank you. Question I've got, particularly Damo mentioned something about international sales agents. Now, I'm a producer, we've just done a feature film with a Scottish cast here, and I took it to one international sales agent at Wild Bunch because I know the guy. I've known him since we were at school, and he told me he would not take the film to theatrical distributors because, and I quote, there are no big stars in it. He said, yeah, some of your staff, your cast are known in Scotland, okay, that's fine, but outside of Scotland, they're complete unknowns. So what I would say to you is, John Travolta, Bruce Willis, all these guys, it makes sound box office sense to get these guys in a movie, okay, right, but these guys are in their 60s. Now, if international sales agents and distributors stick to that kind of policy, what about the stars of the future? What about the new emerging talent? When are they going to get a chance to shine? So what is the take on the distribution companies that you have relating to this? Would you refuse to release a film because there's no big stars in it?
I don't think any of us can. Don't think any of us can afford to have big stars in our films on a regular basis. So
not unless they're dying.
Yeah. I mean, actually, one of the things that your friend at Wild Bunch has got wrong is actually how strong the Scottish market is right now. As I said, we did Sunset Song at the end of last year. And the cinema figures in Scotland were terrific, and actually the film, it's a Terence Davies movie, and it has cast, but in the rest of the UK it underperformed comparatively to Scotland. Obviously they're well locally and have had a life outside of Scotland because of the strength of that local support. I mean, even films like the Wee Man, which was a Glasgow set gangster film, but they actually did. I can't remember how much it did in the cinemas, but I think it was shown in like a couple of cinemas in south of the border and mainly just did a Scottish release, but then it went on to do great DVD business. So, I mean, I would say actually for your film is if you feel that the film, if it's a good film and that the Scottish audiences will respond to it, then that's a good base for you to build your release. And you know, and because I mean, when the Scottish film comes to us, we know that there's money to be made in Scotland, and that's a good enough basis for us to take a punt on the rest of the UK and Ireland.